Our final speaker, I'm really delighted to welcome Sabrina Lasevitch, who's joining us from Brazil. So it's the Federal Fluminense University. Please correct my terrible pronunciation. So I'm really looking forward to today's presentation on re-enchanting the clinic by decolonizing autism, decolonial archetypal psychology for autistics in peripheral capitalist countries. So we'll make you feel welcome.
Hi, good morning everyone. First, I'd like to introduce and describe myself. I am Sabrina Lasevitch, a cis woman with white skin and short curly black hair. I am autistic, ADHD, and gifted, and I am Brazilian, born and raised in Rio de Janeiro, Rio. I am a PhD candidate in psychology at the Federal Fluminense University in Rio, and I also run a private clinic, which was born at the crossroads of feminist psychology, neurodiversity studies, decolonial and Afro-Indigenous Brazilian studies, and archetypal psychology. Both my doctoral research and my clinical practice focus on Brazilian autistic women identified in adulthood, most of them with more than one neurodivergence, usually a combination of autism with giftedness and/or ADHD, as is my own case. In addition to that, I am also a macumbeira. That is, a woman who practices Afro-Brazilian spiritual traditions. I am a reveler in Rio's street carnival and a political activist. In my case, I am a macumbeira of Umbanda, an Afro-Indigenous Brazilian religion that emerged in Rio in the early 20th century and is therefore deeply characteristic of the city's history. All these details are important because the work I am presenting to you today is the fruit of this mixture. Both of my research and my clinic are based on localized, decolonial, and transversal knowledges. Knowledges that are simultaneously feminist, Latin American, and neurodivergent. And I will explain what that means, starting with the title of my work. Re-enchanting the clinic by decolonizing autism. First of all, what does it mean to re-enchant a clinic? To understand this, we first need to understand how clinical psychology was disenchanted and how this is connected to the colonization of autism, as my dear friend and fellow autistic researcher Giovanna Nicolau teaches back there in Brazil. According to Jennifer Mullen, another author, the author of the Decolonizing Therapy, colonization is an ongoing process of separating the subject from land, culture, identity, ancestry, and the traditions of their community of origin. To colonize is therefore a violent act of identity theft, of dispossession from home and community in order to impose on the colonized subject the colonizer's culture, values, and even identity as the only legitimate ones. This creates, within colonized groups, a feeling of displacement, of unbelonging, and a distorted sense of identity that, as Frantz Fanon teaches in Black Skin, White Masks, generates a series of psychic sufferings. That is why every colonization leads to an impoverishment of cultural, symbolic, religious, and scientific frameworks, and consequently to the disenchantment of the world. But why disenchantment? Let's take the example of autism in psychology to illustrate this. Modern Western psychology tends to study autism almost only from the perspectives of biology and cognitive behavioral science, sciences, perspectives that have their place and have been reinvented by more critical researchers, but are typical of a certain way of thinking and doing psychology. This psychology stems from Western European psychology, philosophy, a philosophy that separates body and mind, placing the mind hierarchically above the body, and does not even work with the concept of soul. It is the psychology of the cis, heterosexual, white European or North American man. It is therefore a literally soulless psychology, mechanistic and functionalist, perfectly serving the needs of a specific political economic system. For this system to survive, it needs to produce efficient, functional, docile bodies that learn to obey and to produce. Any deviation, disobedience, or idleness will be disencouraged within this system, either by medicine, which pathologizes it, or by law, which criminalizes it. The psychology of the colonizer is thus very close to the medicine and to law, a normalizing and pathologizing psychology. This is also a psychology produced by cultures with monotheistic traditions, religious beliefs that attributes the sacred to a single form, image, or model, which will serve as the reference for all others, and against which every other mode of existence will be seen as imperfect, inferior, or deficient. And in a white patriarchal monotheism, the ideal model of humanity is, of course, the white European cis heterosexual neurotypical man. When a monotheistic group colonizes polytheistic groups, one of the first things the colonizer does or tries to do is erase all the sacred references that the colonized groups carry. And since these gods are often connected to elements of nature, the process of colonization also promotes the profanation of Mother Nature, now violated by a man who is soulless, disembodied, and anti-elemental. This is roughly why colonization sets in motion, on a global scale, a process of disenchantment of the world, and psychology is included in this. In such cultures, only psychologists that deal exclusively with cognition and observable behaviors are granted scientific legitimacy, ignoring dimensions such as affect, art, soul, ancestry, culture, and all subjective experience that cannot be externally observed. This is such a reduction of the field of psychology that it can lead to dangerous distortions. In the case of autism, we end up with a psychology that only considers autistic, 1, those whom medicine has defined as such, 2, those whose observable behavior matches the list of symptoms catalogued under the diagnosis of autism, and of course 3, those who, because of this pathology, fail to deliver the performativity demanded by the hegemonic socio-political economic system, and are therefore considered dysfunctional. I am dysfunctional because I do not fit in the ideal behavior of an employee in a company, because I do not fit the roles of the bourgeois nuclear family, because I do not love according to the patriarchal monogamous model, because my style of sociability is not exactly gregarious, because my religiosity is neither monotheistic nor patriarchal, and for many other reasons that makes us divergent, deviant, insubordinate to the colonial civilizational project. And this must be read in that context. Here I echo Jennifer Mullan's warning about this kind of psychology. So what would a decolonial and therefore re-enchanted psychology of autism look like? To think such a psychology, Mullan already gives us a clue. We must look at the colonized groups, that is, the Global South, the so-called peripheral capitalist countries. Because although colonial efforts are continuous, they never succeed in being total. Within these groups, there always are, and always will be, breaches of resistance to colonization, productions of escape lines, insurgent lines, inventions of life-affirming modes of existence, and therefore affirmations of difference and of life itself. In Brazil, in addition to the Judeo-Christian cosmologies, we have Afro-Indigenous Brazilian cosmologies, drawing from, for example, Bantu, Fon, Tupi-Guarani, Yanomami, and many others. All of these are worldviews that, besides being polytheistic, link the sacred to nature. Umbanda, for example, is one of these Afro-Indigenous Brazilian religions. In it, there are many African gods and goddesses called orixás. You have, for instance, the orixá Oxum, goddess of love, abundance, fertility, sweetness, and beauty. Oxum is also a goddess of cunning and courage because she is too a warrior, but not a bloodthirsty warrior, rather a strategic one. Another strategic warrior is the orixá Oxaguian, a warrior god of peace. He knows very well how to wield his sword, but only does so when necessary and for humanitarian causes. He is a warrior of human rights. In Umbanda, there is also Exu, the trickster god of Yoruba mythology. Exu is the dynamic principle of existence, the movement of becoming, singularization, communication, and controversy. Exu is the principle of differentiated existence, the Lord of crossroads, the one who affirms opposites simultaneously, creating bridges and playing with life's paradoxes. When we talk about difference, deviation, irreverence, questioning intelligence, and communication, we are talking about Exu. And within Umbanda, in Brazilian soil, a feminine Exu was created, an entity of mixed origin with African, indigenous, and European elements called Pombagira. Pombagiras are female entities that represent the unsubmissive, feminist woman, sovereign over herself, joyful and playful, who asserts her difference with grace and sovereignty, bowing to neither patriarchy nor any other oppressive system. Within these cosmologies, Exu and Pombagira are the father and the mother of human beings marked as eccentric, insubordinate, and true. Those who affirm their differences with grace and firmness, knowing that diversity is a vital principle of nature itself and that there can be no revolution without laughter. In Brazil, the neurodiversity movement would not even exist without Exu and Pombagira, because they are the deities that affirm difference, protect diversity, defy oppressive forces, and, with their playful intelligence, build bridges by inventing new ways of existing that amplify life, filling it with joy, intensity, and new possibilities. In the clinic I've created, I work with the archetypal images of Pombagira to guide autistic women who lived through decades of masking and neurotypical colonization toward a more authentic life, where they are sovereign over themselves and so firmly grounded in that sovereignty that they no longer bend to any attempt of colonization. It is about recovering the dignity and the beauty of autistic women's difference. And of course, this had to be done in my case through archetypal psychology, since I am not only academic psychologist, but also Brazilian and macumbeira. Archetypal psychology is a mode of Jungian psychology created by North American psychologist James Hillman. It centers on archetypal images that we can draw from many sources, mythology being one of them. In clinical practice, we invoke an archetypal image when we want to work with that image's attributes in the subject. It is a way of personifying human attributes to be developed. Here, Personification is a procedure that animates the clinic, that is, that returns the anima, or soul, to the psychology consulting room. Personification is more broadly a procedure of recovering the anima mundi, the soul of the world. Thus, to personify is to practice a necessarily counter-hegemonic, revolutionary, and decolonial psychology. This is the proposal of archetypal psychology, to encourage imagination, to bring archetypal images into the consulting room and to let those images speak. It is therefore a politicization of the psychological clinic. And in my clinic, this politicization, or re-enchantment, is carried out mainly through the archetypal images of Exu and Pombagira, who are the great Afro-Brazilian patrons of diversity as a sacred principle of life. I would like to mention Chicana author Gloria Anzaldúa, who is a major reference in Latin American feminist studies. She says, "Empowerment comes from ideas. Our revolution is fought with concepts, not with guns, and it is fueled by vision. By focusing on what we want to happen, we change the present. The healing images and narrative we imagine will eventually materialize. Imagination, a function of the soul, has the capacity to extend us beyond the confines of our skin, situation, and condition, so we can choose our responses. It enables us to reimagine our lives, rewrite the self, and create guiding myths for our times." Finally, as the incorrigible activist I am, I would like to call upon all the neurotypical professionals here to join us in the neurodiversity movement. Bring neurodiversity into your fields of work, into your psychology clinics. And again, I echo Anzaldúa, letting her words resound once more in this hall. She says, "Diversity of perspectives expands and alters the dialogue, not in an add-on fashion, but through a multiplicity that's transformational, such as in mestiza consciousness. To include whites is not an attempt to restore the privilege of white writers, scholars, and activists. It is a refusal to continue walking the color line. To include men, in this case feminist-oriented ones, is to collapse the gender line. And to that I add, to include neurotypicals, the neurodiversity-affirming ones, is to collapse the neurology line. These inclusions challenge conventional identities and promote more expansive configuration of identities, some of which will soon become cages and have to be dismantled. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Do we have any questions? I'll give anyone a minute to approach the mic. Well, I have a question that was really wonderful, and I loved the images, so powerful. So I was wondering those figures, that was new to me today, so I am learning. Is that something that would be known, those images of the Pombagira in schools? Is that a really well-known, are those images well-known to people?
Yes, they are very, very well known in Brazil. They are very popular, and all the women that come to me in my clinic, they already know them.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, brilliant. No, I can't wait to share it with people I know. I just think it's wonderful. That concludes our session for today. I think we have one quick question. If anyone wants to go and get your coffee, feel free. Go ahead.
Yeah, I won't take long. I just want to thank the speaker. I see a very similar correlation with the Indian mythology because of the goddesses and the gods, and especially since you focused on women, I do recognize that what we might call autism in the modern age is actually very highly sensitive women who are connected to spirituality and who have spiritual gifts. And by the way, you can find a lot of these autistic women in healing spaces like Bali and other places, have seen for myself. And that I think with the modern systems, they've been ostracized. I think back in the day they were called witches, and they were burnt back in history because they don't fit typical styles of what people in power want them to be like. But thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Please enjoy your break, and thank you for your patience with me as a speaker. I want to give everyone a voice and be representative of everybody as well. So thank you.